So this is our last week for this year. We might get Acts finished next year. Whew. But this is our last week for this summer in the book of Acts. And we're leaving it just at the start of Paul's third missionary journey, his third and last missionary journey. But today we focus on this story of the riot in Ephesus and to see what we can learn from these events of the past. During the gold rush in America, as people took their wagon trains and they headed out west, and you had, there's gold in them there hills and all that kind of stuff. During the gold rush, the towns everywhere just kind of popped up all over the place. And there was a real life and excitement and enthusiasm about them. They were buzzing as people went in search of fame and fortune and new life, having left the old world and went exploring into the new. But today, many of those places are ghost towns. They're deserted long ago. And all that's left are the buildings as they begin to collapse and fade away. But if you visit one of those places, it's almost as if you can hear the voices and the people of the past. You can imagine it. You can imagine the excitement and the wagons going up and down the street and all of that kind of stuff. And it kind of fills your imagination of what it would be like. In fact, some people even try to recreate what it would have been like. I don't think that needs any other comment. Today, we're going to travel effectively to a ghost town that's called Ephesus. When we get there, we'll see that there's not really much there. It's pretty barren, it's pretty empty, it's a marsh. We see that one pillar sticking up out of the ground. And that's where there used to be one of the 7 wonders of the world. It was the temple of Artemis. And it's hard to imagine in the midst of the ruin that was once a city with a population of 200,000 people. A huge city, a really important city. And today, there's nothing there. In fact, you can see just on this left-hand picture, Ephesus is almost at the border on the right, and the sea is now nowhere near it. Once great seaport. Now 6 miles from the sea. With the help of Luke, we go back to when that city was at its peak. And if you traveled with Paul and you went into that city, it would be really impressive. That's obviously a kind of impression of what it would be like. So you can see in the top left hand of this bottom picture, that's the sea and where the port is. And there's a stadium there that seats 25,000 people. Sometimes we think we've invented these kind of things. 25,000 people in that stadium. And that's the stadium that they're talking about in the story today when they dragged these 2 Christians. And then as you come further up, the temple is right at the bottom of the picture. And that's just a kind of artist's interpretation of what it might have looked like. But a huge place, a huge city. In the West today, we are used to seeing skylines that are filled with skyscrapers of corporate banks and big companies and all of that kind of stuff. If you had gone back 150 years, the skyline would have been churches. And that would have been what you would have seen because they were the tallest buildings around. But today, we're used to all the big skyscrapers and all of that when we go to the city. As Paul walked into Ephesus, he would have seen statues to the emperors. There were fountains everywhere. It was a beautiful place. There was, having just done our Arizona last night, there was a mall There was a shopping centre, the Agora, huge place as well. The most important building, though, is the Temple of Artemis. It was the first structure that was built entirely of marble. It was 60 feet in height. The pillars were 60 feet in height. It was 425 feet long, 225 feet wide. There were 127 columns in it. I mean, it would have been really impressive. It would have been a truly magnificent building in its day. And so you can understand why Demetrius gets a bit put out when Paul turns up. It's not that Paul is having a go at the gods in the area, but what he's saying is there is actually only one God, and that is Jesus. And you need to put your faith in him. And then he sees people actually doing that. And last week we saw that they were so affected by faith in Christ that what they did was they came and they burnt all of these books. And it was a fortune's worth of books on witchcraft and idolatry. And if that's what becoming a Christian does to people, you can see why Demetrius is getting a bit anxious. Because they're not going to want to buy his silver idols. And so he and his pals might go out of business. So actually, it's not so much a faith thing as an economic thing. And there's nothing really quite like combining religious insult and the prospect of financial loss to upset people. Artemis was their primary god. One of the gods of Olympia. She was the goddess of fertility, and if you really wanted to worship her, that's where you went. To do it properly, that's where you went. And you didn't mess with her followers, because they were really devoted. The city was responsible for the purity of worship of Artemis. So you jolly well better get it right. It was also the largest bank in the empire. Does that sound kind of familiar? You see, throughout history, money and power and religion have gone hand in hand, and not always for good. But we come back from the ancient world of Ephesus for a moment and consider our own religious skyline. Our world is populated with thousands of religions, thousands of places of worship of all sorts of sizes and shapes and styles. Some religions are quite new, some are older than Christianity. So how is it that as Christians we say Jesus is the way? Is that not arrogant? That's a big question. Come to Alpha and find an answer. The truth is, the truth. No, it's not arrogant. You can say it arrogantly, you can treat it arrogantly, and you can be arrogant about it. But it's the truth. Jesus is the way and the truth and the life. And no one comes to the Father except through him. Our world champions toleration and acceptance and celebrates diversity. And all of that has a place. There's no question about that and no doubt about that. In fact, we could argue, I suppose, that in our world the true gods are actually pleasure and money and fame. So how do we respond to all of that as God's people today? Well, I think what we do is we live as God's people today. We be the disciples that we were called to be. And as these two in the story were taken away and were in front of that crowd, they probably didn't get much of an opportunity to speak or to say anything. And anything they said would have been drowned out by the crowd. And so often we will find ourselves in that place where all around us there's chaos and hubbub and commotion. And people don't really listen to what we have to say. But we still have to take that stand. Back in Ephesus, Demetrius is very persuasive. It's sporadic, it's shouting, it starts up, "Great is Artemis of the Ephesians." And it begins to grow and it begins to grow. People are running around getting each other excited. And they're stirring each other up. And they don't even, it says, they don't even really know why. They're just beginning to get all excited. And we understand that happens in a crowd. And you know what happens quite easily today in social media? Somebody will make a comment, and all of a sudden it's all over the world, all over the internet, and everybody's commenting about it, and they don't know what they're talking about. They don't know whether it's true or not true. Well, actually, it must be true because it's on the internet. But the reality is we don't know, and it's easy to wind people up. It's easy to get them going. And that's what happened here. And then there's this murmur in the crowd, "Oh, it's all to do with Paul and these Christians." So we go looking for Paul and the Christians. They don't find Paul, but they find the two Christians, Gaius and Aristarchus. And they take them into this theater that holds 25,000 people, and there's this huge crowd, and they're all there, and they're all shouting, and they're all chanting.